Well, as I told you, the weather is quite hot. And speaking of hot, we got some hot congressional races coming up in our district here. And the primary is coming up in June. We have one of those candidates here. I'd like to welcome Greg Raths. Nice to meet you, sir.
Thank you very much.
You are running for the 45th district, and it obviously includes Laguna Woods, but I'm not going to mention all of it. It has actually varied anywhere from parts of Anaheim, Anaheim Hills, where I live, and Rancho Santa Margarita, Tustin, Mission Viejo, covers an awful lot. So before we get into some specific questions, tell me a little bit about your background.
Well, I grew up in Phoenix, Arizona, and my father was a World War II pilot.
So you're used to this heat.
I'm used to this heat. I didn't know any better growing up. Catholic family of 8 kids, and my father was a World War II pilot. And all my life, I wanted to be like him and be a military pilot. So I went to Arizona State, graduated, and was commissioned an officer in the Marine Corps. And I went to flight school in Pensacola, Florida, and became a jet fighter pilot. And I thought I'd do it for a few years, and after 30 years, I finally retired. So I had a good time. Then I went on to be a commercial airline pilot with JetBlue Airways. And
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
And then my buddy ran a company in Anaheim, and he asked me to come on to be the president of the company. So I was president of an auto parts firm, and then we recently sold that. Now I'm running for U.S. Congress. So pretty diverse background. I have business background, military background, and come from a big family.
Oh, very good.
I'm very excited.
I wish we had time to speak on the difference between being a jet fighter pilot and flying for JetBlue. I imagine there's a lot of differences.
Yeah, it's very boring. That's why I switched careers after only 3 years.
Let's get into some of the topics. And, you know, one of them that we've seen in the last few years is the Republican Party. You're a Republican, and I'm sorry I failed to mention that. It's been a very disjointed party in that you have what I would call the moderate Republicans. You have what some people may call, for lack of a better term, the religious right Republicans. And you have the Tea Party. We've even seen within the Tea Party, there's multiple factions within there that kind of sometimes argue with each other. So talk a little bit about that to me. How does the Republican Party come together to become a cohesive mass where they can put their best candidates ahead?
Well, one thing about our party is, yes, we have different factions in the party. And I became a Republican after Ronald Reagan became president. Being in the military, he really took care of us. He gave us new weapon systems and gave us pay raises. So that's when I switched to the Republican Party. But there's nothing wrong with having like the Tea Party and the religious right and basically the establishment, because we all need to work together. I believe our party has to come together because I'd like to go back to like Abraham Lincoln. He was our first president as a Republican.
That's right, yes.
And he was a uniter. He did unite the country, you know, during the Civil War. And it was the Republican Congress that authored the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments, which freed the slaves, gave them the right to vote, and gave them due process of law. So myself as a commander in the Marine Corps and as a businessman, I unite my people. When I went into battle, I had 3 combat tours. I did just to take one segment of my Marines into battle. I took my whole Marine unit into battle. So I want to do that with the Republican Party. I believe we can come together when the time is now to ensure that we get across the principles of limited government, lower taxes, and things like that.
Okay, yeah, and one of the reasons I brought that up is just recently a potential presidential candidate, Marco Rubio out of Florida, was sort of chastised by, he came under fire by members of his own party because he worked with Obama, or is working on immigration policies. Him himself comes from, I believe, Cuban immigrants.
Right.
Yeah. Let's talk about one of the biggest topics that the Republicans have talked about over the last year or so, and that is what's called Obamacare, Affordable Care Act. And quite often you'll hear many people in the Republican Party will say, we want to repeal the Affordable Care Act, but they don't seem to have a concise answer to, okay, what would your plan be? And we kind of saw that in the last presidential race. So what would you do? You're in charge, let's say. What parts of Obamacare do you think can work, and what parts would you like to change?
I like to use the word retool. I think
Okay, much better term.
Obamacare, the original people who wanted it, I think their hearts were in the right place. You know, trying to help those without insurance, those with pre-existing conditions, and maybe the young adults who are 26 and under can be under their parents' plan. So I have no problem with that. I think that's a great idea. But whenever you get the federal government involved in some type of program, it gets bloated with this huge bureaucracy. You know, my webpage for my campaign cost me $9 a month, $9.99.
Yeah.
And this website for Obamacare, $500 million. So we see when the federal government gets involved with a program that it kind of gets so bloated and out of control. So Obamacare, if you look at it, the reason they kind of implemented this program is to help those without insurance. And there's approximately 40 million Americans without insurance. And you know, the president, and I'm not an Obama basher at all, but he gloats that, you know, now we have 7 million signed up. Well, the whole idea was to help these 40 million. And unfortunately, of the 7 million that are signed up, about 4 or 5 are people that actually lost their insurance. So they had to go to Obamacare. So, man, I just didn't think it was necessary at the level they put the program through. So let's kind of work together. And if you remember, the program was put together just by the Democrats. It was strictly on a party line. They had majorities in the House and the Senate, and obviously the president. So let's work together against, you know, along party or with the other parties, and come up with a plan that is I think should be more amenable to the public. And I just see Obamacare just getting this big bloated program that it doesn't have to go that far.
So yeah, I like your view on retool. I think
because you're not going to repeal it per se.
Yeah, there's a lot of people that are on this whatever amount you want to come by, but to take it away from them all of a sudden would be very harsh. But retool, I think that's a really good way to look at it. You know, you along with a lot of people, a lot of other, not only Republicans but independents and things, look about a lot of the different restrictions that are on different businesses and things like that. Now, some of these, I think you would agree, are necessary, you know, with the SEC, let's say, and the FDA and airline industry, right? There are certain rules and regulations that have certainly been quite beneficial. So when you look at that whole thing, well, we need less restrictions on business, what part of that would you change? Would you like to see that?
Well, here in California, you know, you want to bid for a California some type of project, you have to be a union, and I would like it opened up to all businesses, union and non-union, and I think that's killing the business here in California. It only has to be union if it's a state or some of the cities have their own. But when I was president of my company, there's so many regulations, and we're in auto parts. And certain auto parts could go to 49 states, others only could go to California because you had to have a specific ingredients and say a brake pad or whatever, so it makes it so difficult. But what we found out, there are just so many regulations. It was just we were taxed so much that we ended up selling the company. We either had to move it either to a business-friendly state, or we ended up selling it because I obviously wanted to stay here in California because my family's here, my grandkids are here. So I would, you know, the government is good in some areas, as you say, in the airline industry. You want to make sure all the pilots are trained correctly. But sometimes when they just get over regulated to the point where it really doesn't pay off in business. But like even the EPA, you know, remember the Great Lakes were just burning, you know, and they're all dead, and you know that was great. We cleaned up the lakes, but let's not go overboard. Because right now we have all this water up in Northern California, and we can't get it because of this little fish called the smelt melt, and the farmers aren't getting any money in the Central Valley. And so let's be realists and look at what this state needs and what the country needs as far as regulation. And I know we need some, but let's not go overboard. And what I see in Washington is these bureaucrats have to justify their jobs, so they have to do something, and sometimes they just really over-regulate, makes it hard on business.
Okay, if this comes to pass for you, you're new to politics, am I right? Have you been involved with it in some form, maybe in the background or working with other candidates that you supported?
Well, I had a job.
Yeah, okay.
Had a real job. No, I haven't. I worked my whole life, 30 years in the Marine Corps. I retired at the rank of colonel. I was a fighter pilot, squadron commander, as a group commander, wing commander. I did an assignment at the White House. I was the Deputy Chief of Staff of the Military Office. We oversee the President's military support. And what I'd like to mention to your viewers is my competitor, State Senator Walters, has been attacking me as being a Clinton clone or a Clinton Republican. And it was a military assignment. I was signed to the White House Military Office, which is a nonpartisan job. So for her to do that is either very ignorant of her, what the military support of the president does, or she's just playing dirty politics. And that's pretty sad, because she's a Republican, I'm a Republican, it should be that way. But with what I was trying to say is, as a squadron commander, group commander, I have that leadership ability to go to Congress. And I want to use that leadership I learned in business and in the military to go to Washington and try to bring some unity and craft solutions to problems instead of just having this bickering back and forth. And I've talked to literally thousands and thousands of people. And I've knocked on doors, and not one person, not one, has told me to go away. They want to talk. They've never met a politician. And they want to understand what's going on, what we can do if they send me to Washington so I can craft solutions to problems. And
Well,
that's
very
what
good.
that's what they want me to do.
Very good. It's been a pleasure to meet you. And I want to mention his website, gregraths.com. It's in District, it's for District 45. If you want to get a hold of him on Twitter, Greg Raths for Congress. And
It's Greg Raths for Congress 2014 on Facebook.
on Facebook. So.
Twitter is just Greg Raths.
Okay, very good.
And you go to my webpage, that's my personal number if you want to call me.
All right, very good.
I take every phone call.
Very good.
So June 3rd is the election. I ask for your vote. Top two go on to the general election in November. So let's make it happen.
All right, thank you very much for coming out. It's been a pleasure, sir.
All right, thank you, Ken.
All right, we'll be back in just a moment.